Hello, I'm David. I work at Twitter, and sort of related to that, but kind of unrelated to that, is the fact that for the last 4 years or so, I have been hosting the occasional game of Blankety Blank on Twitter. And in this talk, I'm going to talk about why on earth that came about and the kind of key things that I've learned in hosting what has been described as the most culturally irrelevant game show that's possible to host on Twitter. Now, if you cast your mind back to kind of January 2016, so over 4 years ago now, the year got off to a very sad start. We lost, I think, David Bowie in January and Alan Rickman, and then at the end of January, in a year where we're going to go on to have a lot of celebrity deaths, very sadly, Terry Wogan died. Now, I remember Terry Wogan a lot from kind of growing up. It's quite a big part of my childhood. My mum used to have him on Radio 2 all the time. I remember the Wogan TV show, and he hosted Eurovision, and I vaguely remember him hosting a show called Blankety Blank. I wasn't in any way obsessed with either Wogan or Blankety Blank. I kind of watched it when it was on. There wasn't a lot of choice back in those days, and it was a perfectly kind of watchable, quite a funny and entertaining show that you could kind of join in with. And as a young kid, that was just all I ever really thought about it. But weirdly, his death, no, not weirdly, I guess you recognise kind of how much he sort of meant to people when someone like that goes. Had quite an effect on me. I was weirdly kind of emotional about the whole thing, I guess, because of links back to my childhood and because he just seemed like such a nice fella. Now, I don't know why, but I was on a train into work, which is not unusual for me, in one Friday morning, and I was reading about Wogan, obviously on Twitter, and for some reason I decided to get my phone out, and I thought it'd be a nice thing to kind of mark and pay tribute to Wogan, to basically suggest that we all play a game of Blankety Blank. So I got my phone out and I tweeted, in a week where we sadly lost Terry Wogan, let's have a game of Blankety Blank. There's 50, 100 and 150 blanks to play for. Now at this point you might be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? And you'd be right to think that. So let me try and explain a bit about how it works. So what we have here is the super match game at the end of Blankety Blank. So if you ever watch the show, there would be two people going up against each other, and then the one who got the most points would go through to a final game called the super match game, and you were given a word, in this instance the word little, and there was 150 blanks, 100 blanks and 50 blanks, and the better your guess really, the more blanks you got. So you could get a prize for 50 blanks, 100 blanks, 150 blanks. It's a very simple concept that I probably overcomplicated. So in this instance, you've got the word little, and the answers might be, I don't know, little chef, little mix, little house on the prairie, etc. Just word or words that fit in next to that word. That's kind of a really simple concept. So that was a game that I was asking people to play. I had no idea if anybody would kind of guess or join in, kind of anxiously waiting to see what the response would be. And eventually I got a guess. I think the first ever guess was from Dara, who I work with at Twitter, and he guessed, the word was actually blank space, and I think he guessed parking space, and it was on the board, and the whole sort of game evolved a bit from them. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but Blankety Blank was then going to go on to become a weirdly not big, but not big-ish, I guess, part of my kind of online brand, if that's not a horrendous thing to say. And it's just a very, very fun and silly thing that we occasionally play on Twitter. So what I'm going to do is just chat through the 10 things very quickly that I've learned from hosting, and I use that term very, very loosely, Blankety Blank on Twitter. First thing is that actually live hosting of anything is actually really hard. Again, I use the term hosting loosely, but live broadcasting is hard. In that first tweet that I sent out, people were sort of guessing wrong answers. They were replying, it was all a bit chaotic, saying, I've guessed the wrong answer, should I delete it? Someone was saying, should I quote tweet the answer that somebody else has given? Are we still playing for 100 blanks? It was a bit chaotic, not helped by the fact that I actually arrived at Waterloo midway through the game and then consequently got on the tube. So people were guessing, and I simply wasn't online in order to answer it. I came out from the tube after 10 minutes. Got lots of messages saying like, are you on a WAP connection? Have you gone to do something else mid-show? That kind of stuff. People wanted it to kind of be live in the moment. So it's quite hard to host a live show. So what we did was actually, we evolved it and decided to change the format slightly. when I say we, I mean me. There isn't a team, but for some reason I like to use the term we because it implies that there's a team behind it. So we decided, based on this feedback, that we would change the format slightly and give people like a 3-hour window to guess, and then at the end of that 3-hour window we'll come back and do the answers. So that's the first thing I learned. It's hard to do live stuff. The second thing I learned related to that immediately is that feedback is of course a gift, and I kind of knew that, but it was very reassuring to know that people were listening and playing, and also genuinely loathing the experience. So I was getting lots of replies saying this is rubbish, loads of gifs of rubbish being thrown all over the place, people asking how was this ever primetime TV. John Wilshire, wonderful Welsh, described it as like a one man's mallet's mallet played at scale across Twitter. If you know what Blankety Blank is, you'll probably know what mallet's mallet is. And people sort of just send me, you know, gifs just saying this is rubbish. I got one from Fred Macaulay, the Scottish comedian, and he just sort of points at the camera and goes, boo! And I got to send that one from Ewan. He said a rude word at the beginning that I won't say on this. So yes, feedback was a gift, and I sort of took all that on board and largely ignored it. More positively, I learned that playing games is of course fun, and I think we all know that. Nothing like kind of playing games to make you forget what you're doing and sort of get lost in that moment. It's a really weird thing. The metrics on Blankety Blank are insane. We get about 200 people on average play every time. It's not the same 200 people. And it's about manageable when that many play. So if you ever get more, it becomes kind of quite difficult to host. People sort of respond to saying, well, I think this, and my wife thinks this, and my kids think this, and yeah, my husband thinks this. It's just lovely to see people sort of joining in weirdly from kind of all over the place, because everyone just loves games. It's a nice simple game. So game playing is good. Again, not a new thing, but it's the third thing I learned. Playing games is fun. I also learned that as well as it's fun just to play the game, but actually people love to win. However silly the whole thing is, if you announce that somebody's won the checkbook and pen at the end of each game, the person who gets the most blanks basically wins the Blankety Blank checkbook and pen. It's just a picture of a Blankety Blank checkbook and pen, but when you award that person, you mention them in your tweet. People love it. So they're sort of quote tweeting it, saying it's the best day of their life, that kind of stuff. I'm not entirely sure they're being serious, but you know, people seem to love winning, however silly the whole thing is. So you get people high-fiving each other virtually when they put the same answer as somebody else. It all kind of cliques form. People who won and people who didn't. I think Charlie did have in his Twitter bio winner of 598 blanks in the 2016 season of Blankety Blank. So some people like to really like to win. And then the fifth thing, though, is that it kind of has to feel legit. There's a very weird thing where we give out bonus blanks as part of the show. So if your guess is good, or you've done particularly good emojis, or you've come up with something that I haven't thought of that should have been on the board, we can give out bonus blanks. So yeah, that's a great reply. I have 11 bonus blanks, that kind of stuff. It's only when you talk about this you realise just how absurd the whole thing is. But even though people like getting bonus blanks, when they get real blanks, I was surprised to hear people kind of go, oh, I've never had none bonus blanks before, this is brilliant. Like somehow real blanks have more value. When of course real blanks have no value because I've literally just made up the answer, and I probably should have stressed that a bit earlier on. There is no, how we get to the 50 blanks, 100 blanks, 150 blanks is literally just the first three things that I think of. There is no referring back to old episodes or looking it up on YouTube or letting Google autocomplete finish it. None of that. It's literally just the first three things that I think of, which is obviously hugely arrogant, I guess, that you're kind of saying, guess what I'm thinking here. But I guess it's kind of the concept of the show, really. You have to match with somebody else. If you're from the US, it's basically the match game is the same as Blankety Blank, I've been told. I've never seen the match game, but that's apparently it. Anyway, so people love winning as long as it feels legit, and although they're happy to take bonus blanks, real blanks have more value. Getting on that board seems to have value. The sixth thing I've learned is that people love to kind of be creative, and they stick to the rules. The rules are reply to this tweet with 3 guesses as to what the blank might be, what word or words might fit in the blank. That's literally the rules. But within that, people are very creative. So you get people replying with lots of emojis, with pictures, with 3 pictures, 1 for each answer, with links to kind of YouTube songs, all kinds of stuff. So people are very, very kind of creative within the constraint that you give them. And I guess it's just something you can learn about, just constraints generally. You give people a constraint and people are very creative around it. So that's another thing that I've learned. And then another thing that is a sort of weird side point is around what I'm going to kind of rather grandly call distinctive assets. So some sort of distinctive assets really matter, but others really don't. So I'm going to show you here. This is how the Blankety Blank Supermatch game board has evolved through the years. So I don't know how well you can see that, but that was the original sort of set there. We evolved it into a slightly different set, and then this is the kind of current sets that we play with, and then occasionally at Christmas you can kind of add some tinsel or whatever and sort of tailor it. My Keynote and PowerPoint skills are not very good, so there's a limitation in terms of what I can do. But it doesn't really matter, because the key distinctive assets really are the hashtag blankety blank and the fact that you're replying with one of 3 answers. So it doesn't really matter what this looks like, I've learned. So I think that's quite interesting, sort of loosely, in terms of what you can change and what you can't and still have it feel like a game. The other thing that we changed was the frequency. So it used to be a weekly thing, but in the end we stopped doing it weekly because it just became too much hard work. Actually, it's quite a lot of admin to actually spend 3 hours replying to people, working out who's got what blanks. I mean, I know we all have our cost to bear, right? I don't expect a lot of sympathy, but there's a fair amount of admin there. The 8th thing, just the serendipity and the wonder of kind of random collections of people really work. And Twitter's great for that, of course, because it's an open platform. But the kind of people who play, I've got people who, my friends play, my family play, colleagues, ex-colleagues, people in the same industry as me, people who support the same football team as me, people I've never met, don't know who they are. We've had celebrities play. Jeff Brazier played once. Carol Decker was once the top answer. The word was blank hand, and the answer was China in your hands, and she retweeted that weirdly. I've got a fella, Simon, who has the same surname as me, who I've never met, and we killed each other, brother. It's just a really weird and wonderful thing. I just love that sort of interaction, and I really like seeing when people start interacting with each other, because this silly game did that, kind of created these sort of new collections. So yeah, the random kind of collections of people really work. And then getting towards the end, number 9, what I learnt was actually the importance of an exit strategy, because when this was a weekly thing, it just, as I say, it became quite intense to sort of keep doing it, so that we have to sort of stop. So at the end of 2016 we played about 30 games. I was like, okay, we're going to stop playing Blankety Blank now, and we might come back for the one-off specials, but to be honest, we sort of play it once a month now, roughly. And when lockdown started, I thought, well, I was going to try and play it more often, because this is what people need right now, clearly. And so we play it now every week, every couple of weeks. But it's very hard actually to continually come up with a new word that 100 or so people can reply to without them all getting the same answer. And again, I don't want any sympathy, there are other people with much bigger problems than that. But that's the reason why we don't play every week. But having sort of said we're not going to do anymore and then come back for one-off specials, there is no exit strategy, so this will probably go on forever. And then the final thing, I guess the 10th thing, which I sort of touched on before, is just you couldn't play this game on Instagram, or you could try and play it on Snapchat. You could probably, you struggle to do it on TikTok or LinkedIn. There's something wonderful about Twitter, and I know I work for Twitter, and so of course I'm hugely biased in this, but the kind of magic of Twitter at its finest. I love all those kind of silly word games you get on Twitter, change a letter, ruin a band, that kind of stuff. I've always really liked those, because I think as well as being all about the kind of big and serious stuff and about your passions and about your interests, and about the global conversation, I love it when Twitter feels small and feels intimate. So even though you've got lots of people playing this game, the whole thing feels kind of quite small and quite tight and quite intimate. And I guess that's kind of why I've kind of learnt and relearnt that through Blankety Blank, and I guess that's why we kind of keep it going, really. It's not in any way important. It's frankly ridiculous, silly and distracting. But sometimes the world needs ridiculous, silly and distracting things, including, I guess, this talk. There are many, many better ones available to watch now. But anyway, that's me. That was how we started doing Blankety Blank. and that's the 10 things I learned. Thank you for listening.